The Dunbar armed robbery, considered the biggest cash heist in history, also happens to be one of the most successful robberies in history, at least at the time that it was carried out. The robbery would have remained a success too, if not for one tiny mistake a couple of years later. Want to find out what that mistake was? Then you've got to stick around to the end of this video. However, what I tell you right now is that in addition to being the biggest cash robbery in the United States, this is one interesting story of how important it is to surround yourself with smart people. You'll understand as the story unfolds, so strap in and let's dive in. The legendary robbery took place September 12, 1997, but of course months of planning went into it. The heist was masterminded by a former Dunbar employee, Alan Pace, who worked as a regional safety inspector. Being a former employee meant he had a general idea of where the money was, which was a vault, by the way. But being a regional safety inspector meant that he had inside knowledge of the company's security protocols and weaknesses. However, he wasn't leaving anything to chance. He took the time to examine the company's layout, mapping out what routes would be best for a quick entry and exit. And to be completely sure that he wasn't missing anything, he took the time to take photographs of the different locations and get his hands on the floor plans. But he knew that his chances of carrying out a successful robbery alone were very low. The Dunbar vault was always guarded, and overwhelming them by himself would be either too complex or completely impossible. So he recruited a team of childhood friends, 5 of them. He provided them with tools of the trade, including ski masks, pistols, and a shotgun. He also showed them photographs of important locations that he had taken and walked them through the floor plan of Dunbar Armored. In retrospect, it's interesting to think that this ragtag team of first-timers was able to pull off one of the biggest heists in American history. They weren't really a group of seasoned criminals who had done this kind of thing before. They were just a group of friends that seemed to be coming to the aid of one of their friends with the hope of making some extra money for themselves. Who would have thought that Alan Pace III, Eric Damon Boyd, Eugene Lamar Hill Jr., Freddie Lynn McCrary Jr., Terry Wayne Brown Sr., and Thomas Lee Johnson would pull off the biggest cash theft in the United States? Anyway, back to the story. The robbery was carried out at night, of course, but that's not what makes it obvious that Pace is a smart guy. Before the party of 6 went on their expedition, they showed up at a house party for a bit. They partied and mixed with people, making sure not to be intoxicated. This was to establish an alibi, of course. So once they felt that they had sufficiently been seen by people, they escaped the party and went to the Dunbar facility, gaining entrance thanks to Pace's keys. Now, back when Pace was doing his homework in preparation for the robbery, he had studied the security cameras to determine what time of the night would be best for their heist and how to avoid getting caught by the cameras. So the group of 6 was easily able to gain entrance into the building via the staff cafeteria. Then they proceeded to ambush the guards who were taking their lunch break at the time. I say lunch break, but it was actually 12:30 in the morning at this point. Anyway, the guards at the cafeteria were not the only people in the company at the time. The vault, which was Pace's target, of course, had 2 guards stationed there. But everyone was caught by surprise, I guess because Pace and his friends quite easily subdued the guards at the vault the same way they did the guards at the cafeteria. I mean, they had the guards bound and duct taped before they could even fire a shot or signal the alarms. With the guards down for the count, there was nothing standing in the way of Pace and his friends. The vault itself was open, so the guys didn't even have to try to jimmy the lock, which would have made the whole operation a lot more complicated. As a former employee, Pace knew that the vault is usually left open on Friday nights because large quantities of money are usually moved during that time. So no vault break was needed for this operation. By the way, this has to be one of the reasons why a regular group of best friends could pull off the heist. They didn't need to have any particular skills to pull it off. They just needed to trust one another and work fast. And once inside the vault, the group did work fast, It definitely helped that there were 6 of them, but probably the biggest factor in their speed was Pace's inside knowledge. He knew which bags held the biggest denominations and only concerned himself with those. So in just 30 minutes, Pace and his friends had managed to load $18.9 million into a waiting U-Haul truck. They would have probably made it to $19 million if they had taken the time to count while still in the vault. But being quick was of the essence. With the money stacked safely in the U-Haul truck, Pace made one last stop. He went to where the recording devices for the security cameras were located and made away with them. The plan was to make it impossible for investigators to connect him or his friends to the robbery, and it worked. After the successful robbery, the group of 6 made their way back to the house party and partied the rest of the night away, cementing their alibi. The entire robbery couldn't have been more than a couple of hours. News of the Dunbar armored robbery spread like wildfire, capturing the public's imagination and the attention of law enforcement across the country. The sheer audacity of the heist and the staggering amount of money stolen made it one of the most notorious robberies in American history. But considering that there was no break-in involved, the police immediately figured out it must have been an inside job. Interestingly, Alan Pace was one of the first suspects, chiefly because he was fired not too long before the robbery. However, investigations on him came out clean. He had no previous arrest and there was nothing connecting him to the robbery. So, for years, the police could not pin anything on him and didn't even consider his friends. All 6 of them did what they could to conceal their freshly stolen wealth, not spending any of that money or attempting to launder it even 6 months later. And when they did try to launder it, they enlisted the help of a professional. These guys were really determined not to get caught. The professional whose help they enlisted was David Matsumoto, a Los Angeles immigration attorney. They paid him and his office manager, Joaquin Ben, $1 million each. So they were both more than willing to help in the laundering of that money. Matsumoto definitely knew his onions. He created an airtight money laundering structure that included buying cars and property in specific places, investing in companies, and writing checks and W-2 tax forms, all of which made it seem as though the 6 guys were actually earning legitimate money. The structure worked, and in fact, Pace decided to do his own thing, creating his own front companies and even employing another man to buy property. This way, the property would not be listed under his own name, further throwing the scent off of him. It's safe to say that he had learnt from the best. However, one of the friends, Eugene Lamar Hill Jr., must not have been paying too much attention when the lessons were taught. About 2 years after the robbery, he paid an estate broker in cash. That cash was part of the money stolen, of course, and the reason the broker was able to figure that out was because the money was still bound in the original branded currency straps. The broker immediately alerted the police and Hill was apprehended. Hill was certainly not going to take the fall for anybody, so without too much encouragement, he sang like a bird, naming all his friends who were involved. Hill, McCrary, Brown, and Johnson, all who immediately pleaded guilty, received between 8 and 10-year sentences, so all of them should have been released by now. The 5th friend, though, which is Boyd, received a 17-year sentence. That was because he used a gun and had a prior criminal record. Their ringleader, Alan Pace, initially claimed innocence, but with Hill's confession and the others having pleaded guilty, it was a lost cause. His guilt was really glaring. So as the ringleader, he received a 24-year sentence and was released on October 1, 2020. Of course, their lawyer accomplice, Matsumoto, and his assistant Ben were not left out. They were both indicted on 71 counts of money laundering and got 2.5 years in prison. Matsumoto also had to resign from the state bar. As for the money, only about a third has been recovered so far, in the form of homes, cars, and other such investments. Authorities posit that the rest of the money is gone, probably spent gambling or even burnt once the guys realized that the bills were marked and could be easily traced. The FBI is still in search of the money, though, So, and considering that most, if not all, of the guys have been released from prison, another theory as to the whereabouts of the money could be that the guys are currently enjoying the fruits of their labor. Thanks for watching again. Like stories like these, make sure you click the subscribe button before it disappears. See you in the next one.